they need to follow the minutes. So we can't have a situation where there's a constitutional coup launched by officials to try and be protocol implementers.
Let's start to get some political reaction to this. The leader of the SDLP, Colum Eastwood, joining us this morning. Well, whatever way this has come about, and some people might be very interested in whether this is being coordinated. Someone's thought this up. But here we go, Colum. We've got the letter in front of us. Minister Poots is going to put this in front of the executive within the next 3 weeks.
Well, I see we have the puppet on today. I wonder where the puppeteers are. I mean, if people within unionism are going to let themselves be led by Jamie Bryson, the man who's more comfortable standing on wheelie bins and pretending that he's some sort of lawyer, I think they're in serious trouble. The reality is, as you've pointed out, this is an international agreement between the British government and the European Commission. It's an agreement negotiated, of course, by the British government, and they now say they don't want it. But all of this comes about because of Brexit. And people like Edwin Poots and Jamie Bryson and the rest of them all asked for this. None of us wanted this. I actually campaigned against it vigorously when these people were campaigning for it. Where did they think the border was going to go? Where did they think the checks were going to go? Now what we have is a negotiation between the British government and the European Commission. The European Commission have come forward with far-reaching compromises to try to use the protocols to get rid of 80% of the checks, to make sure medicines can get in. And what do we have today? A legal stunt. And we have the DUP threatening to bring down the institutions.
You can call
Let's see where this all ends up for unionism. This is the strategy they're going to adopt.
Well, you may call it a stunt, and you're entitled to do so. But the reality is you've got it now in black and white. You know what's going to happen. Within the next 3 weeks, no later than the end of January, the executive is going to be forced to vote on this. And you know the DUP are against it. Let's find out what the UUP says this morning. So that then puts the border checks in a situation where they're not going to happen.
No, I'm sorry. I mean, DUP ministers, like every other minister, have a legal obligation to implement an international agreement that we're all party to. Whether I like it or not, the UK government are the negotiating partner with the European Commission, not the Northern Ireland
Edwin Poots is saying he does not. Edwin Poots is saying he does not have authority to do so without executive approval.
Well, I mean, let's see what the Attorney General says about that. I'm not sure anybody will be listening to Jamie Bryson's advice around international or constitutional law. We will figure all of that out. The reality is there's a responsibility on devolved authorities to implement international agreements. There's a responsibility on this DUP minister and the executive as a whole to implement international agreements.
So are you saying...
Would we like to see some changes around that?
Just to be clear, Colum, are you saying that executive approval means nothing? That ministers on cross-cutting and controversial issues can just bang on without executive approval?
No, I think the executive has to take a position around this, which is to implement the checks. They've no authority to do anything.
Well, you know the DUP are not going to do that.
Well, if the DUP think that we end up, and of course Jamie wants this and other people like Jim Allister wants this, if they think that it is going to be good for unionism to pull down the institutions, because that is the path that they're on, they keep threatening it, then, well, let's see where that all ends up for them. It'll not be good for unionists. Worse still, it'll be bad for the health service in the middle of a pandemic. It'll be bad for the education system. It'll be terrible for the economy. But this is the kind of stuff that these people are more interested in. We saw it from Sinn Féin 6 months ago. We saw the Assembly being brought down for 3 years. What happened? The health service got in the worst position. That's why we're not able to deal with the pandemic in the way we would like to today. There are young people kept emigrating. Our education system is in big difficulties. Our economy is in big trouble. We can't create the jobs that we need to create. See, I think that the DUP and at different times Sinn Féin are very, very happy to focus on these kinds of sham arguments, political fights of who's going to be First Minister, who's going to walk out, all of that stuff, because it means that the electorate aren't focused on the mess that they've made of government over the past 15 years. But let me just say this very clearly. If the DUP or anybody else within unionism have any wit at all, do not be listening to Jamie Bryson. He is not going to bring unionism to a better position, and he will definitely not bring our society to a better position. He has not been elected by anybody and wouldn't be elected by anybody.
The diversionary tactic, as some might describe it, though, Colum, What I'm talking about here, and I'll let Jamie respond for himself in a moment.
Well, I have no interest in debating with Jamie Bryson, by the way, Stephen, to be honest. If they come on to debate with Jamie Bryson, he hasn't been elected by anybody, and I think it's a fair enough position for me not to have a debate with somebody who's a pound-shop lawyer who stands on top of bins talking nonsense and trying to rile people up. I'm not getting engaged in a conversation with him. I'm happy to discuss it with you, but he has no mandate to debate me or anybody else.
Well, I'll let Jamie Bryson speak to me in a moment or two, but the reality is there is a letter from a minister